Welcome to Truth Podcast. I'm your host, Hany Rambod, and I'm here with none other than IFBB Pro. I got to say that because you pay the money to have IFBB Pro for your name, and you deserve it. Yeah. Jared Feather. Hey, brother. I know it's EasyVision weekend. I appreciate you coming out for that. Absolutely. And we decided, when are we going to get your butt in here to do a podcast?
Perfect time.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Jared and I got to actually meet in person. What was it, like 5 months ago? 4 or 5 months ago at the Nationals.
A couple run-ins, Nationals, and then where we met.
Yes.
The place that's unknown still to people.
Yes, Five Guys.
Where we saw
it was Five Guys. I was there eating Five Guys with I think I was there with Nick, and I can't remember. And we were down there, and I was having one of my keto burgers that I love so much over there. And then all of a sudden you're just randomly there, and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" Yeah, you came over. You're like through the glass waving, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And you were here for Nationals, and then we ended up doing a workout together the next day.
That was great,
and it was great because I honestly didn't realize that was the first workout you've ever done with somebody outside of your own programming. And I thought that was really cool because for you to be open-minded enough to get together. And I was like, cool.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Well, it's not you can't claim to be somebody who really enjoys the science and evidence behind training and dieting and not be open-minded. You know, if you're super closed off and you have your own internal biases all the time, you let them sway kind of the way and direction that you interact with people, you're probably not actually evidence-based.
Right.
Yeah. Because anecdotes exist. So one of the best coaches in the world, why would I not use that opportunity?
Yeah, no, I mean, and it was cool because it just worked out. The next morning, you came in. It was like I remember it was like a 7, 8 a.m. workout.
Yeah, it was early as hell.
Yeah,
because we both had to go to Nationals later.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we got in there, had a great workout. Got you to do some FST-7 stuff, and got you to be able to do a little bit of those FST-7 flex sets and all of those. And again, I mean, you're known. Obviously, you coach Mike Israetel.
Yeah, we'll call it that.
What you did for his shows, and you say that because he's just not really 100% on top of the program. Is that why you're?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, so when we say we coach each other, kind of, but really, it's just I've always coached myself. He's always coached himself.
Okay.
When we think about doing something really stupid, we'll call each other.
Okay.
So we got a couple of friends that we can do that with.
Okay.
A couple that understand pharmacology really well. Someone like Mike.
Okay.
Hey, I'm gonna take my carbs to 0.
Okay.
What do you think? I know it's stupid, but what do you think? And he's not dieting, so he's like, that's dumb. Have fun with all the cortisols.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So stuff like that. And then just giving Mike suggestions really deep into contest purpose. A little tough. Yeah, he doesn't exactly like to listen.
What makes him not want to listen though?
It's more of a Mike question, I guess. You know, I think he just kind of he gets super deep into dieting. He gets in his head. He thinks he knows best a lot, and a lot of us get that way. It's just like it is super hard to coach yourself, which is why most of the top guys don't do it.
Right.
It's not that the top guys don't know what they're doing. It's that they rely on somebody to put the plan forward and just like be an athlete. And I just think that's hard for a lot of people to really be an athlete. But when you can, give the reins over to somebody, obviously, if you're just doing what they say and they know what they're doing,
right,
you're going to come out with a good look. It's just really tough when you're overly analytical and you're in the space and you hear somebody say something that you might not agree with 1 or 2 times.
Right.
It's like, do they really know what they're doing? But to me, I still value the input.
Right.
And I have somebody who helps me with my supplementation and diet at the moment.
Right.
And he helped me last prep, and I enjoyed every step of the way.
Yep.
Even if there was stuff on there, I was like, I don't know about this.
Right.
I'd be like, hey, why are we doing this? And he'd be like, well, this is why. I know you don't really like refeeds too much. I know that they don't really do anything metabolically, but I think it's a good thing for cortisol reduction at this point in time, just so we can lower your stress a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. Still don't disagree. I still don't agree, but like, let's do it. You're the coach. I'll take my hands off, laissez-faire. And I think Mike just has a hard time with that sometimes.
Because Mike he's obviously very intelligent guy, right? And I think that it sounds like he questions a lot of things in general, right? Yeah. And the thing about bodybuilding is a lot of it is science-based in regards to like, hey, by the way, I'm taking a philosophy on PEDs and I'm putting those philosophies together because there's no clinical studies to be able to say all of these things have been really put together. So if somebody has experience, it's not the same as doing a clinical study on a particular exercise and does it grow muscle versus, again, using a set number of PEDs or PED protocol. So a lot of that is a lot of trial and error is where I feel like, high level coaches have to go through to be able to kind of manipulate.
Yeah, and that's the way it has been for a long time. And I think the UK is a little more, they got their hands a little more on the human data behind a lot of this stuff. So that's one thing. Like, what I do with the person who helps me with my stuff is we typically just refer to it as like a safer use, just because it's only stuff that's been used in human trials, like things for like, whether that's breast cancer patients or burn victim patients, like Anavar and stuff like that.
Sure. You're talking about not like peptides. Right. You're not talking about.
Well, I won't touch the stuff that hasn't been used in humans. So like harsh shit, like you've heard of like mint and DHB. We don't know much about those compounds, and I'm not going to put them in my body. Even if a coach was like, "Hey, I want you to run this for like 6 weeks," I'm like, "I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that."
Well, there's a lot of those things, right? I mean, what's your take on all the peptides? Because I have a certain take on them, but I'd love to hear yours. Because again, when you're talking about anabolics have been around for many, many years, right? All the derivatives, Winstrol, Anavar, Deca, test, all the esters of testosterone, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah, the typical test route, and then you got the 19-nors, and you got the DHTs. Yeah, they've been around. They've been pretty well studied
for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so when you turn around and you say, hey, this has been studied for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, right? It's been around for synthetic testosterone compounds have been around for a very, very long time. So, a lot of the different hazards that go along with it, right? High blood pressure can mess up your lipid panels. There's a lot of those things. Then you start throwing in the anti-E's, and then obviously those can cause also some different issues, especially like the lipids, especially your HDL levels. But when you start talking about all of these other things, so like when the SARMs, and you start talking about different things, peptides, a lot of these have not been tested for long periods of time. And when you're getting a lot of these compounds, it's for research only, right? It even says it on the research only, right? Yep. So it hasn't been given to a mass population for a long period of time or have been studied. Yeah. What's your thought process on that because of that? Because again, you being so science-based and whatnot, I'd love to hear your take on it.
There are a lot of channels that you'll see that do deep dives on different peptides and kind of the mechanisms behind them. A lot of really smart people, biochemistry, PhDs, and things of that nature. I think the unfortunate reality behind all that is they're looking at the mechanisms behind what it should do, and kind of saying, because of this, it should be safe to use, and now I have a clinic throwing it out to everybody.
Right.
I just don't agree with that much, if at all. I think a lot of the things like GLPs have been studied for a very long time. A lot of the fat loss agents and things of that nature. So there are peptides that have been very well studied. There are peptides that are being thrown out to the public that I probably wouldn't put in a client. I wouldn't put in myself, not just yet, not until they are. Actually, kind of a little more data comes out on them. Things like the SARMs, like you're talking about. Those definitely haven't been studied long enough for me to be comfortable with them, for me to be comfortable with giving them to people. As like, as we're entering this age of like the new tech singularity and everything, we're obviously going to have better data a lot faster because of AI. And I think, within 5 to 10 years, maybe these things will be shown to be very safe and effective, and we'll have even better stuff, like maybe even myostatin inhibitors and things of that nature. Hell yeah, that's cool. But a lot of the things that people say on these peptide channels and what they're teaching is like, here's the mechanism behind how this should work.
It should work.
Exactly.
That's right.
It should work.
Right.
We don't know what else it's technically doing, though.
That's right.
And it could be acting on other cells, potentially cancer cells,
who
knows?
There you go. So that leads me into exactly why I've been talking about this for a very long time, since all of these have been very rampant for the last 10 years. I've seen a huge spike in illnesses. I've seen a lot of people getting sick. I saw a lot of people in the Middle East getting sick when they were going rampant on peptides, right? And we
had the BPCs and TVs and things of that nature.
All kinds. They were just all kinds. They were doing high amounts. And what was happening, vasculitis, people, like tons of stuff. Because like you said, and this is what I said, you get gene expression. And what happens is when you don't know which genes are going to express, your body's constantly fighting cancer. It's constantly being able to kind of, do a self-check, almost like a virus check on a PC. And what it's doing is it's keeping your body in check. So if those cells go a little bit rogue, it cleans itself up, and then it never really becomes cancer because of the fact that your body's constantly fighting that. And then as your antivirus software ends up getting, as you get older, or you have certain gene expression, or you have certain genetics. Again, I'm speaking about it because my mom had leukemia when I was 14 years old, and she had ACL, acute myeloid leukemia, AML, which is the hardest, most prevalent version. Like, to me, it is least likely for you to survive, right? She had a 9% chance of living back in, my sophomore year in high school. And it was one of those things that why I decided that I was going to compete naturally, right? Because I did not know what kind of genes were going to be expressed. And being that I was very science-based, and my degree is in biology with an emphasis in neurophysiology, biochemistry. I think that's what I geeked out on in college and got my degree in. And I was competing as a natural bodybuilder. I got into natural supplements to try to circumvent the hormones, circumvent IGF-1, GH, any of those things that can express those types of genes. Because you can't go in there and express it and say, I want to just focus on these cells, right?
Not yet.
Yes, not yet. And then when you get into some of these newer compounds, even more so, right? So when you turn around and you start talking about these new compounds, it becomes very scary. But when you're talking about Anavar, DECA, Test, all of these things, pretty much cause and effect. They've been very, widely studied. So for me, that's the same thing as what you're saying, which is like, this is one of the reasons why I'm like, do not talk about these things, because these things, again, I've been able to be part of a lot of bodybuilders' journeys to win Olympias and turn people pro for a very long time, and they weren't necessary at that time. And so when people turn around and think that there's one singular anabolic agent, it could be insulin, right? Or it could be any of these peptides or any of these, and then you go, oh my God, well, you have to do IGF-1, LR3. You have to do this. You have to do that. It's no, because again, as being a coach for over 30 years, didn't have to use any of those. Right? So now, did some of the clients do? Yes, absolutely. But I was never a fan of insulin. Been very open about that. Jay Cutler's talked about how I took him off of it. So now I talk about it, and I'm good.
I talked to Jay about it too.
What did Jay say?
Same shit. Same exact thing you said. Because we had that conversation out here. So then when I saw Jay, we were talking about it. He's like, I didn't do it for that Olympia, and it was one of my best looks ever. I was like, damn.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But no, I agree, man. It's just because we know these things really well doesn't mean that better things aren't going to come. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a peptide out there that is like kind of like a really strong agent that's going to help with a lot of things.
That's right.
But I just don't think we're there yet to promote it as heavily as a lot of people do. There's like all kinds of crazy shit with the healing peptides where people are mega dosing BPC and mega dosing TB.
TB
I'm like, do you know what's going on with like the GI with that stuff? Do you know what's going on with just like the lymphatic system or their just the ability to recover after they get off of it? Like, I just don't think it's well studied enough to really say, hey, mega dose this stuff, and then make it super available information for people to be like, oh, well, this guy mega dosed it. Let's just go ahead and shoot up all this BPC and TB and whatever other peptides people want to put in. And I'm like, that's a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Like you said, people didn't use it back then. What happened to like figuring out your diet and
training
and nailing that down?
Getting your nutrition, your training, and there's so many great natural supplements that you can be able to help with just being able to recover, help with strength, all those things. I mean,
like I said, these peptide channels, they could. Nobody actually has 100%, but I'm going to say this as an example. They could be 100% correct about a lot of the things you're saying from the mechanistic standpoint, and it could just potentially be just that mechanism that's occurring. I am not comfortable with saying with 100% certainty that that's exactly what's going on and nothing else is going to happen.
That's right.
Which is why I would not do it with somebody.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
it's on the person, obviously, just like it's on the person to come to you and be like, I want to be Mr. Olympia. I know what it takes. I'm going to do the anabolics. And that's their, I'm pretty libertarian. That's their choice.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you about the downfalls, the pitfalls, and I'm going to tell you about the same thing with like the peptides. And if you choose to do them still, when you have like a strain, I'm going to tell you why maybe you shouldn't mega dose it and maybe what dosages are probably a little better. But I I can't make the decision for you.
Right.
Talk to multiple people about it. Maybe talk to an actual physician about it.
Yep.
Like, probably smarter than just hopping on the bandwagon.
Right. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the physicians just don't know either, right? Because
For sure.
they're not.
There's a lot of
about
good
it.
sports med doctors out there now.
There's new
that
ones,
are,
yes.
that are definitely learning from people who are a little more versed in the biochemistry behind that stuff. So that's good, at least.
Yeah.
And it's going to get better all the time.
And I think that those doctors are the best doctors are going to be the ones that have experience,
For sure.
right? Because they have
Just like the
a
coaches.
clientele that are taking, TB or BPC or any of those types of compounds, and they go, hey, look, this is where I found it useful. This is where I didn't find it useful.
Yeah.
This is if you have these pre-existing conditions, diabetes, heart disease, this and this, I would keep away from, or whatever it is. But or your lipids, profile is this way. That's why I would not recommend A, B, or C.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes from, again, trial and error. Because modern day physicians, the problem I have with them is the fact that most of them don't know anything about wellness. Most of them never been trained on nutrition. They're just really trained to go through medical school and have the basics, and then they get, trained by a lot of farm reps at that point. They don't go to the root of the problem when there's issues. So when you go into any of this performance, then it's even less doctors that have any of those backgrounds, right? But when you look at your clientele, or when you're working with somebody, do you feel like you're sitting down and trying to look at it all holistically, or how do you break it down? Because I know you don't have a ton of people that you work with, but when you're doing things, what catches your eye? Is it more of the training side, or do you kind of look at all of the things proportionally when it comes to nutrition, training, supplementation?
Generally, it's all of it for the most part for most clients. Oftentimes, it's just training. Sometimes it's just training and diet, because like yourself, I loved working with naturals. I've turned like 50 plus people pro in natural organizations and worked with tons of natural pros, tons of natural world champions. So my biggest thing through school, obviously, was the training and the nutrition. The master's degrees in exercise physiology with the emphasis in like exercise metabolism, so similar stuff, biochemistry.
Right.
And part of that, like tons of training content, tons of training stuff. So when I sit down with a client, it's more of an annual plan basis. Like, here's what they want to do.
Right.
Here's what's smart to do. Here's kind of the general structure of it all. Somebody wants to compete. I think it's too soon. I tell them why. I say, here's a block of what we'll do for your massing phase. Here's how the general outline will be. You're going to be in a hypercaloric state. You're going to be eating more food than you're burning. And you're going to do this with your training. Here's the muscle groups that I think we should emphasize, or they're just natural and too small to give a shit about emphasizing muscles, so we just train the hell out of them. And then we'll go through a phase where we maintain you, and I'm going to put you on a maintenance diet. And then we'll do this for the other block of training. And by that time, you have like a pretty structured annual plan for a client. So that's the first thing you got to do, is like a needs analysis with a person. You sit them down, you do a needs analysis, you say, what do you want? What are your goals? Blah, blah. Okay, that's a great goal, but you're not going to be Mr. Olympia. I'm sorry. So let's scale it back a little bit. And then you just you discuss with them what they want to do. After that, you develop the annual plan, and then you kind of step by step auto-regulate what's going on from there. So it's not just like, okay, well, let's start training and dieting tomorrow. It's like, I want you to do a full deload. I want you to kind of get rid of the fatigue you're already carrying. We're going to go through this process over that week where we do the needs analysis. I develop your annual plan. We discuss the annual plan. We agree on the annual plan.
Right.
And then from there, we go into the phase that we decided, and we auto-regulate based on how you're looking and if you change your mind. So somebody could be in an annual plan where they're like, oh, I wanted to step on stage in a year. And then they're like, hey, I'm actually getting into grad school in 9 months. Can we push that up? I want to do the show in 7 months. And then it's like, okay, cool. We're 2 months in. Let's go ahead and do the maintenance phase a month early. And start the diet a little earlier too, because that's just what it is. It's auto-regulation. That's you do it too.
And I think the cool thing about it is that you're just basically you're putting a blueprint together.
Yeah, that's it.
Right? And then you're working backwards. You're saying, hey, this is where I'm going to want it to be. And then I'm going to need 12 to 14 weeks in this phase. I'm going to need another 4 to 6 weeks in this phase. And then I'm going to need another 8 to 12 weeks in this phase.
Bingo.
Right? And this is how we're going to turn around and do it.
That's it.
And then you put together the nutrition, the supplements, and then you make sure that all of the hormones are regulated properly, whether you're natural or whether you're enhanced. And that's how you go. Right?
Yeah, so that's part of the needs analysis too. Like, when was your last blood work?
Absolutely.
Send it over.
Yep, absolutely.
I need to see what's going on.
Those are musts, right? Those are musts. You know, and then I think, again, a lot of people always ask me, like, what is it that made my success, like the percentages of my hit rate so good, right? And it was a lot of it I would filter out by talking to people and understanding the mentality and not trying to put a round peg in a square hole, right? And I feel like, do you go through the same thing? Do you do that? Or is it like, how do you kind of decipher who you want to work with? Because again, I would always almost psychoanalyze somebody to understand, am I going to be able to make them coachable? Like somebody like Mike, right? Just bringing him back up because he's such a, like, again, he's a brainiac, right? The guy is super smart. He's got so much going on. But is there ever a time in your head that says, like, dude, I can't coach this person because it's very uncoachable. He's very tough.
Yeah.
I have to decide on how do I want to deal with that frustration or not.
Yes and no. There's an initial consultation where you're getting to know somebody to begin with. At this point in my life, I'm able to kind of pick and choose. So I generally know the people. Like I either know them pretty well already or they're a content creator, let's call them.
Okay.
Or somebody high level in bodybuilding.
Right.
Or some like actor, let's say. And I know that they have a specific goal. I've seen their stuff. I've listened to them talk. We have an initial consultation. We talk about their goals. We do the needs analysis together. And at the end of the day, they're sussing me out too.
Right.
Like, how does this guy respond to my emotional state? How does he respond? Like, what's his answers? What are they like? Are they concise? Are they short? Is it kind of like a do as I say type of guy? Is that what I want? Because you're not for everybody.
Right.
Like, I'm not for everybody either. The client might not be for me. I might not be for them. So we're kind of sussing each other out. And after the call, it's like, how do you think it went? And then, you know, I give them feedback. And I'm like, if I said this, what would you say? And same to them. They're like, yeah, like, I've had people who are literally like, I feel like you're too sympathetic. I feel like you're too in tune with like what I feel and what I want to do. And I just want somebody to tell me, eat this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not your guy. I'm not your guy. I'm just not going to do that. I'd rather teach you and mentor you. So that is kind of like the difference. Because I think most of your clientele were like, do exactly what the hell I say. And you also had a really good, like, you were very like in tune with their emotional states. Like everybody you've coached that I've heard, they're all these like, Hany gave a shit.
Yeah.
I did what he said, but he knew when something was off, and he gave a shit.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of people need. They just need to be told what to do, but they also need a coach that can pick up on that shit.
Yeah.
So what you did is amazing. And then for me, I'm not the just do what I say type of guy. Right. And if a client wants me to just tell them exactly what to do, it's odd. So even with like, let's discuss Nick, for example. I'm like, here's the exact thing I want you to do, because that's how he is.
Right.
With your
And
training.
we're talking about Nick
Walker.
Walker, right.
Here's exactly what I want you to do with your training. Yep. If I put an exercise on here that you do not like, tell me, and I will change it to something that is very similar and stimulates the muscle in a similar way. And that's all he needed.
Sure.
If I was like, you have to do this, he would have done it for sure. Like he would have just sucked it up.
Yeah.
But there's give and take.
Right.
So
You want that feedback.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them to feel like they have to do exactly it, because what might work for somebody might not work for somebody else. And so therefore you have to have that level of flexibility.
Yeah. But a lot of people don't want it.
Right.
And then I'm like, that's not me. I'm going to tell you to change stuff if you don't like it.
Exactly. and I feel the same way. I think that you do need to get that feedback, right? I do feel that sometimes, though, there has been times, you know, just to give a little bit of reference point to people, I have made a diet extra hard for people. Not really the Olympia guys, but as I was bringing people up to toughen them up.
Oh, wow.
And I did that because what I would need early on in my career was that people that wanted to turn pro was mostly the types of people that they wanted to just the easiest way out.
Yeah.
Right. And what I would do is actually find a harder way, because I'm testing the resolve in the off season, so that if I had to turn around and say, hey, no, I want you to do cardio.
Yeah.
And again, I'm doing it to see how coachable the person is.
Yeah.
Are they willing to listen? Because then when we go to war together during the last 12 weeks of prep for the USA, I know whether or not this person is going to do what it takes. So again, it's my version of Navy SEALs training.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have to be able to have psychologically that strength to be able to handle doing this. Okay. And it's one of those things where it's, again, carb cycling in the off season, doing things that again weren't really traditionally done 20 years ago, right? Yeah. And I would do those things, and sometimes I would be a little more extreme with it because I was testing someone's resolve. Sure. And then when I was able to get them through that, what it did was it actually helped our bond and that trust. Yeah. And then when I was able to do that, when we go into the prep, we'd win the overall to USA. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and that's another good point because that's a very specific clientele.
Right.
So with a bodybuilder,
yes,
that might be necessary. That might be freaking necessary.
Well, it was for me, for my formula.
Yeah,
right?
no,
yes.
and then, and then
but not for like a regular person, right?
Exactly.
Not for a regular person.
Like, I worked with Ethan Suplee, who's an actor.
Okay.
He was the big fat white dude on Remember the Titans? Remember that guy?
Yeah.
He lost 250 pounds and he had like really cool transformation. So I worked with him for the last half of that transformation. And that was more of a guy who I was like, I know your problems with food. I want to get you to a point where you are completely intuitively eating. You are eyeballing the shit out of your food and you're nailing it. Mm-hmm. And we got him down to that 250, brought him back up 10 pounds, 260, created a settling point, and basically got it to where he was just eyeballing his food. Mm-hmm. And he maintained that body weight for a very long time. And that was like, if I were to be like, I'm testing your resolve to an actor who just wants to lose the body fat, like, he would have been like, okay, I'm fucking out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
I wouldn't let them know that, though.
Yeah, for sure. Well, no, but
right,
if he was like, but he would be struggling.
Right,
he'd be
for sure.
He'd be like, I already did this to myself. I already did this to myself.
Yeah.
I lost 200 pounds, and then I gained 400 back, and then it's just like he already did that. Yeah. And there's a better way for that guy. Right. Somebody like a bodybuilder, hell yeah, I've done that to them people too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the guys that would really get back in the day really sloppy, I would really tighten up the reins, and I'd be like, nope. You're too sloppy, and you're not going to be putting on muscle when your body fat is so high. Yeah. And then we're not going to be able to get you shredded because we're going to be so focused on trying to get you lean that we'll never get you shredded. Yeah. So therefore, I would tighten up the reins. Yeah. And I would tighten up the reins, and I would be able to say, no, this is the kind of look I need you to have. I need you to have your abs barely popping out. I need you to make sure that you don't have any lower back fat. I need you to make sure that your glutes are tight, not shredded, but tight when we go into the prep. Because if you are so sloppy, I'm not going to be able to get you shredded because I'm so too busy trying to get you lean. Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's why a guy like Mike, again, bringing him back up, it's like one of those things where he knows so much. And I've worked with some people that, are very knowledgeable. And those are some of the hardest people to coach because they want to question everything or they want to justify why they're not listening.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It happens.
Right?
Yeah, with more
down to the tan. Down to the tan.
Yeah, with more than just Mike too. Well, honestly, the tan thing was crazy.
Yeah, what was that all about?
This is why I told this to him after the show, so I don't care. Like, obviously, anything I tell, like I would say to Mike's face. Like, this is not me shit talking him. Yeah. I said, Mike, you're the worst person that I've ever coached because you hate bodybuilding. Bodybuilding as a sport. You love bodybuilding as a passion project. Right. But the sport aspect of bodybuilding requires you to exfoliate your skin. Yep. It requires you to do the athlete check-in. It requires you to get a stupid fucking tan. It requires you to do posing practice. That's the sport of bodybuilding. You're telling me that you enjoy it, but you don't. You enjoy building muscle and losing fat. Right. You're great at that. He's an amazing bodybuilder, but not a sport bodybuilder. Bodybuilding as a sport, beauty pageant. But he's bad at it. He's the worst. Because he will not do any of that shit. He doesn't like it. But that's the thing. I'm like, you don't like this. Why are you... I don't like golf. I'm not going out and playing 18 holes. Right. Like against people in a competition. Gotcha. Without practicing. I'm not doing that. Why are you doing bodybuilding shows if you hate that stuff?
Was he trying to turn pro?
Yeah. He wanted to, but to turn pro.
Like, just to turn pro?
Yeah, it's we all got that thing inside of us. We're all competitive. I mean, he's a black belt in BJJ. You know what I mean? Like, he's a competitive human being. Gotcha. And there's something inside of him that wants to prove to himself that he can do it. We all have it though. Like I had it too. Now I'm a pro. I want to be on the Olympic stage. It's still there. Like I still have the passion.
Right, but you have the attention to detail, and you're willing to do the homework.
For sure, I'm willing to do the bodybuilding sport stuff. Right, like my last show, I had my best tan ever because I actually did a tan two days out. I did a pain in my skin. I exfoliated 2 weeks into the contest. I worked on posing. Like after we had our posing thing together, I was like, I got to practice more.
That's right.
So I did.
And you could see the improvement, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I did the bodybuilding sport stuff that I also hated. I hated that stuff. the posing routine, all of it. I was like, dude, screw this. Like, why? What the hell am I doing?
It's the pageantry of it.
Yeah,
kind of sucks.
Yeah, but you got to learn to like it.
Yes,
or you're gonna hate the damn thing, and you're gonna end up like how Mike did in his last show.
Right.
Like he was so stressed and hated all the aspects of that stuff. Yeah, he didn't exfoliate his skin. He got one base tan. Like he didn't even get a dark tan, and then he got just the whole check-in process. He hated. He wasn't enjoying being there. You got to fall in love with that part of it, or you will not do well. You just won't. Like you can't hate that part.
No, you have to cross your T's and dot your I's.
Yeah, like so. I'll bring up Nick Walker again. Look at Nick Walker's energy on stage.
Yeah.
It's hard not to look at the guy.
Yeah.
You can hate him all you want, but when he comes out and he's like hitting most muscular and he's like
I don't think anybody hates
the crowd up.
I don't think anybody hates Nick.
Nah, I mean there's haters. Haters.
Well, there's haters because I think that they are fans or they were fans that were disappointed because of the situation because they want to see him on stage. Yeah. But I just think that now they razz him. Yeah. But I don't think they naturally hate him. I think Nick is a good guy. I just think that he's misunderstood. And I think that a bit of it has to do with the fact that they're just disappointed, right? These fans are disappointed because they want him to do so well and they like him so much that they really want to turn around and be like, come on, get on that stage and do what we think you can do and go out there.
There's always people who hate on like the physique aspect. Like you're not a bodybuilder because you don't have Sean Roden shape. Yeah, or Jared, you're not a bodybuilder because your haircut's stupid and that's all I can look at. Like there's always that kind of shit.
Of course.
So there are people out there that do. It's just
but you know
fans of bodybuilding.
Right, but do you know how to get do you know how to get around that?
Oh, I just ignore that kind of stuff.
No, you know what you do?
What?
You kick ass.
Oh, for sure. And that's what he does. And that's what he does.
That's what Jay did,
that's
right?
What he does.
Jay, back in the 2000s, like 2010, 2007, 8, all of those times when Ronnie was done, up until the Ronnie, it was him versus Ronnie. You were either a Jay fan or you're a Ronnie fan, right? And then when Ronnie basically got hurt and then he kind of retired, his lat started shriveling up, his tricep, all that. What ended up happening was now Jay was the heir apparent. And then all of a sudden, Jay was a refrigerator. Yeah. Jay was this because he was no longer like second fiddle, like the guy that was kind of like on the come up, And so what happened was a lot of people put a lot of just negativity in Jay. They called him the refrigerator. They called him all of those things, right? And when he came out and he won the first Olympia, they were just like, yeah, you didn't really beat Ronnie. Ronnie lost because you didn't beat the best version of him. Sure. So it was kind of a shitty feeling for him, I'm sure, because of the fact is that you'd always want to go and beat somebody at their best. But he still won, rightfully so. And then the following year, the whole thing with Victor Martinez, then that created a ton of controversy. But I think what ended up happening was there was a lot of people who just really didn't like Jay. Yeah. Really didn't like Jay. What all turned around was 2009. And because of the fact that he was able to not just win his fans back, but he was able to win the people that didn't now respect him. Yeah. They respected him now because they're like, holy shit, this is, his best look ever. Yeah. And what was cool was to see that it was just like the swell, right? Yeah. The swell. Up till now, even the foot stomp thing, and I'm so proud to be a part of that. But at the same time, the coolest thing was the fact that you saw all these haters, guys that didn't even think he was going to be in the top 5 in 2009, and then it just changed. Yeah. It just changed. Like the world just completely, it was like Thanos' fingers got snapped, and everybody loved Jay.
Dude, to be honest, that's like me and Nick Walker.
Okay.
When Nick was like coming up, I was one of those people who was like, this physique is like blocky. He's super muscular, great arms. Yep. I just don't think he's going to do well as a pro. He blew his pro card out of the water. I was like, oh, wow, he looked good on stage. And then he was going to do the Arnold. I was like, I don't know about that. He won the Arnold. I was like, holy shit. He just keeps proving people wrong. And he kept getting better and better and better. And we became friends. And, we've shared these stories and stuff because he's the same way with RP. He's like, this science shit, man, leaving reps in the tank. What are you talking about? And then he ended up doing it and loving it. And now he's made his best progress ever. Yeah. And it's like, so it's like funny because we both kind of had like similar genesis to each other. And, that's exactly what Nick's done, man. He's just kicked ass, like you said. That's how you shut people the hell up. And I think that that's honestly what's going to happen this year because he is ridiculous right now.
Yeah, I saw some updates. Definitely looking rounder, fuller. So you're doing his training, and then Kyle is doing his nutrition.
Nutrition, yeah.
Got it. So he's doing his nutrition. And so he's got the both of you. And now he's no longer in Vegas. He's back in Florida, right?
He's in between.
In between.
Yeah, he's like, he has his house in Vegas still, and he has a house in Florida. And he's kind of like, but we're going to at least see him every 6 weeks. Okay. So I went out there to startup prep. He was about 306, and
he's doing Pittsburgh Pro for those of you that don't know, and I believe that's about 14 weeks,
yeah,
give or take.
Yeah, and he's 300 right now.
Yeah,
and just
big boy.
leaner.
big boy.
Yeah, it's cool to see, man.
Yeah. So I think that's why I'm saying, like, again, not being in the last 2 Olympias, I think frustrated a lot of fans.
Yeah.
And that's why. But I think the minute he can come back, look great, I think a lot of that stuff is going to be water under the bridge. You know?
Yeah, I think it's cool because
again, I've seen it. I've been there. I've done that. I've been a part of that journey where I've seen people that used to do that.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, the cool thing about, I'm just gonna go on a freaking rant right now because this shit pisses me off.
Tell me how you really feel, Jared.
The cool thing about training with you is seeing how similar the concepts we put in play are to how you train people. People are always like, science this, science that, it's stupid, it's dumb, whatever. It's like, no, it's not. And everybody and their mom who's ever gotten into bodybuilding has tried to do the smartest thing possible to make the gains as quick as possible, to improve their physique as quick as possible. And they hired coaches to do that.
Right.
And the coaches have a passion for training and dieting and supplementation.
Yep.
And they're learning from people, and they're learning about the science, and they're implementing that into their training. Everybody's done this. You just don't like the guys who talk nerdy.
Right.
You have a disdain for it. I get it. All good.
Sure.
You hate the nerds. All right, cool. You're a cool jock. I got you.
Yep.
And what we teach is principles. When people say like the RP method, even when people say FST-7 method, I'm like, Hany just teaches principles.
Yes.
And he tells you that if you added in this thing, you might do even better.
Yeah.
You're teaching you the principles of training.
Yep.
And minus the FST-7, you're putting someone through a session based on a bunch of principles that you know
That's right.
as a coach.
Yes.
Whether that's focusing on the stretch, whether that's you can
Time
leave
under tension.
whether you can leave 1 or 2 reps in the tank, or if you want to take it to failure.
That's right.
And because you took it to failure, now we're going to back off on the sets a little bit because you can't do as much volume if you're always going to failure. You understand these concepts. These are concepts we're teaching, but people don't like that.
Right.
So then it'll be like the RP method. It's stupid. I'm like, okay, there's no method. There's no RP method, guys.
Right.
We're teaching you a concept that you then have to conceptualize.
Yes.
And based on the things we're saying, you have to understand what you're doing yourself and apply it.
That's right.
There's no method.
No.
It's
because everyone's trying to simplify it, and they're trying to oversimplify it, right? And again, when I came out with FST-7, it was really for the ability to create more intense workouts remotely for people, right? So I was coaching Phil Heath. I was coaching a couple of other guys that were getting ready to try to get their pro cards. And one of the things I realized was that when I would go down to LA and I had somebody getting ready for like the USAs, I was like, these guys are not training hard.
Right.
And then I'm here, they train hard. Then I come back, I ask them, hey, how's the workouts going? Oh, I'm not getting as sore. Then I'd go back and I'm like, they're not, how do I create a system so that I can create more intensity remotely if I'm not there? Yeah. And some of these guys are also training alone. Phil never trained with anybody. He always trained alone. So I was always trying to think, not just for Phil, but anybody I was working with, just how do I create a system? So I took principles of high intensity. I took German volume training. I combined those. I love flex sets. I love doing things that you don't do when you're trying to prepare for a show, because I realized that people would get on stage and when they didn't pose enough, they wouldn't look the same. They'd get watery when they would start posing. Yeah. And now I need to institute posing in the training because you'll look better on stage. This is an aesthetic thing. There's been no clinical study on it. My clinical study is my clinical study for 30 years of experience.
Yeah, and just using deduction. Like I did it in the video.
Right.
I was like, oh, you're doing it after one set, so there's not really fatigue interference. That's awesome. You're doing it after the last set of the exercise. Right. Perfect. You're doing it when you're fatigued, which is what you're going to be on stage. Awesome. If you can hold a pose right now, holding it on stage is going to be the easiest thing ever, because I just did a whole set of chest, a whole 3 sets of chest, and now I'm having to hold the most muscular. If I can do that under these conditions, that's the most specific thing possible. I'm going to be able to do that shit on stage. Right. And like, just use deduction, and I don't got to be like, well, there's no study on this, and so you can't tell me that. Or it's just like, no, that clearly that's fucking brilliant. It's not, like you said, it's an anecdote that you came to that made freaking sense, and you just use deduction, and now I've done it. Now I've done it. It's like, yeah, that works.
Right. And that's the thing about it. When I looked at it and I said, wow, when my clients were not posing enough, and even if they weren't posing in between posing, because again, when we're talking about posing, we're talking about, like, I prescribe posing for my athletes getting ready for the Olympia 20 to 30 minutes, right? And we will do time poses. We'll do mandatory poses. We'll do quarter turns. We'll do all of those things. A lot of the amateurs don't like doing those things.
Yeah, no.
So if I could incorporate it to the workout and be able to do that, because when I wasn't, and these guys were going out there for the first time, they would start flexing, they would start shaking. They were doing nothing in the gym that would stimulate the same type of muscles that were firing on stage in those specific mandatory poses. So I'm just like, okay, you're not doing that. So now you're shaking, you're sweating, all of these things are happening because you're not conditioned in the actual posing process.
Right.
So that's what we threw in. So as I was putting all of the program together, that's what it was. And again, the FST-7 original fascia stretch training was so that when we turned around and we were like, okay, how do we stretch to probably elongate, right? To get full range of motion, but also what do we do to also increase blood flow so that we can get the metabolites that are going to help you with being able to really peak all of your different biochemistry so that you can be able to really, really emphasize blood flow into the muscle that you're working. So all of those things together was how I turned around and I put it all together. When you guys created RP, in a nutshell, how would you describe the philosophies? I know full range of motion is very, very, it's like the number one thing that I keep hearing on the RP system is a really good stretch.
Yeah.
What else would you be able to like, as we're defining it?
Honestly, just to, like, again, philosophy is like
Yes.
weird term to use for it, just because it's like our philosophy is just that science is the surest path to the truth, and science involves anecdotes. It involves the literature, the studies, and things of that nature. Right. And the more you can implement best practices, the better the results. Mm-hmm. So you should probably do that. That's generally the philosophy for all of us, right? For every coach. And when you go into the training aspect of it all, it's what I said. We're just teaching the principles of sports science that we've applied to hypertrophy training to help people have the correct terminology to discuss how to train properly, whether that is saying RIR, reps in reserve, whether it is saying focus on the eccentric phase of the lift the most if you want the best results. Right. We're just teaching people the sports science terminology, the periodization behind it all, and it's up to people to conceptualize multiple concepts together to understand. Like I talked about with I just enjoy training to failure more often. So, okay, cool, your volume is going to take a hit. Yeah. So if I say most people can recover from 10 to 20 sets per body part per week on average, but you like to just train to failure all the time, maybe that bumps down to 8. Maybe it bumps down to 8. But you're getting pissed because I said 10 to 20 and you're not taking into consideration 15 other things that I said. Right. You're just mad because you like to train to failure. Dude, I get it. Train to failure. I don't care. Right. But you're going to have to take a hit to your volume. Yes. And you're going to be mad at me because I said 10 to 20 is the average. And it's hilarious to watch these types of things on the internet because it's everything that's ever been said is like a straw man. I'm like, no, we didn't say that. Or we said this thing, but you're leaving out this much context. About people do it to you too. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah. We're just trying to teach you guys concepts, like you said, to help you train hard when nobody else is around you. Right. Train properly when nobody else is around you. Get the best out of your training because that's what we want for you. We're trying to help you build muscle. We're not trying to fight you. Right. Like it's crazy, man. Right. Well, and again, a lot of the things I didn't have the resources that you guys do now. Yeah. Right. It was a lot of anecdotal stuff. For sure. And it was a lot of this like, hey, let's try it and see if it works. Right. Yeah. High volume, great. It worked. HIIT, it worked. Yeah. But what was wrong with HIIT? A lot of athletes were getting torn up. 100%. Right? And again, does it put on muscle? Absolutely. Sure. But it's going to more likely tear muscles. Yeah. I remember talking to Dorian about it, and he got 4 or 5 different muscle tears, right? 100%. And I said, look, man, if you would have just backed off your intensity by 10%, increase your volume by 20%, then I think you could have been able to last even longer, or maybe even, a lot of those things. But I also think the ability to understand things at the time is literally the reflection is it's Monday morning quarterback. It's 20, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But as we're putting things together, I don't think that there's absolute truths. I think there's things that we're learning as we go, right? And that's the thing. I think there is an absolute truth, but it's here, and we're all here. And what we're supposed to be doing is this guy's closer, so let me grab this guy's hand to pull him up the ladder. And then this guy knows something I don't know, so let me grab his hand to pull him up the ladder. And the truth's still over here, but at least we're reaching it together. But what everybody's doing is they're like, fuck your hand, get out of my way.
Oh, I see what
I'm going
you're
to do this
saying.
myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to find the truth myself. I'm just like, okay, but I know this thing better than you. You know this thing, and I'm willing to hear you out. But because you're mad that I'm saying this thing and you don't agree with it, you don't even want to.
You're talking about like the training portion of it and saying
everything. There's like an absolute truth that exists, but we, like you said, we don't know it. So we're just like trying to get there.
Right.
And we're not going to.
No,
but we're
we'll
trying
never
to
get there.
at least
But
pull each other up, and that's why we have conversations like this.
Yes.
Because we're trying to like help each other to that absolute truth that we're never going to reach, but we want to get closer to every single day.
Right.
And if you're leaving the industry better than when you came in, hopefully we leave the industry better than when we came in. And if some 32-year-old is sitting across from somebody else or sitting across from me one day, and they're telling me stuff, and I'm like, oh, damn, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that he took what we said and he expanded upon it and he learned even more. Because like you said, the resources weren't there. There's going to be crazy resources that we didn't have now in 10 years. Like AI is going to be coming up with, it's like, okay, yeah, cool. I think we left this place better than we came in. And that's the whole point.
Let me ask you this. Do you think, because I know on the supplement side, right, there is so much better technology out there than there's been 20 years ago when I was coming up, 25, 30 years ago. I started bodybuilding in the early 90s. And I feel like there's, again, I grew up in the Dorian era. And it was just like, man, if you can get your hands on creatine, it was like, wow, that was like, that was it. That was it. And creatine, again, is still the king of all products, I think, and king of all supplements.
Besides whey.
Yep. 100%. But I do feel like now, again, I incorporate glycerol in several different products. I feel like now I've been talking about for 5 years, 6 years now, other people are jumping on the bandwagon and they're seeing that, right? I've been talking about for the last 20 years, non-stim or very low stim to be able to make sure to focus. Because again, stims help with performance. They help with everything. But there's limitations to it too. Because if you 100%. Go overboard with it, again, I was just talking about it with Sid and with Laura Lee, where I go, I don't like to have my athletes too stimmed out when we train legs because they can't recover.
I've cut the caffeine so much for leg training.
There you go.
And that's something you got to learn. That's something you probably just learned because you coached a lot of people or yourself.
That's right.
And you were like doing a leg day one day. You're like, why the hell is my heart rate 180?
Right.
And then
it won't come down. Yeah. And it won't come back down because, again, if you're off season, you're not as quite in good shape. And then the longer it takes, you want your heart rate to be able to come right back down, and you don't want to overstimulate yourself so that you can get back on the leg press and be able to hit it again.
100%.
But if you're so stimmed up that you can't get your heart rate down, then you're going to have issues.
Yep, you're making your lungs the limiting factor instead of the muscles you're trying to train.
That's right.
What are you doing?
That's right.
Yeah, no, and that's that 3 to 6 milligram per kilogram is kind of like the range we give for people for caffeine intake, and I think people surpass that so much. Like for me, 6 milligram per kilogram. I'm a 100 kilogram male. I should only be getting 600 milligrams a day at my peak dosages, which is like into contest prep when I'm like completely zonked out on the couch and I don't want to move a muscle and I got to take 500 milligram pre-workout to get the hell off my couch.
Right.
And that's the only time I'll do that. And other times I'm usually 3 milligrams and below per kilogram. Right. So like 300 is like my max usually. I'll do a 200 milligram pre-workout. And if I'm doing a leg day, it's like 0 to 100, maybe.
When you're doing your pre-workout right now, what are you using?
The ready to drinks.
The ready to drinks.
Yeah, the Evogen ones.
The EVP Extreme.
So good, man. Oh my god.
Well, again, 10 grams of glycerol.
Not even a product plug.
But so
I fucking love them.
So the reason when I designed
glycerol is amazing.
The glycerol at 10 grams, because again, when I designed the EVP AQ, it was a half a lid for 10 grams of glycerol. Then when you start to stack that with the 6 grams of citrulline, the pure citrulline, the 3.2 of beta, but also when you're talking about caffeine, right? You're saying, hey, look, with my body weight, my caffeine can be anywhere from 100 to 200 milligrams all the way to 600 milligrams. What I also do is take it a step further, right? I say, well, look, maybe what I want to do is I want to work that in synergy with Yo, right? So with Yohimbe and Yohimbe bark extract, so I don't have to go as high on the caffeine, because I feel that Yohimbe is one of the few vasodilators when it comes to actual stimulation and being able to work just in synergy with caffeine. Yeah. Because before Viagra, they used to turn around and give you 5.4 milligrams of Yohimbe HCl. And that was one of the things. And that's one of the reasons why I picked that. And that's why I don't have in that RTD 400 or 500 milligrams of caffeine. I have 200 with 1.5 of yo to be able to work the synergies of the stimulant effect, but without as much of the constriction effects of back in the day. It was 1.3 was the big one, and then you'd feel like Superman, but you would end up having no pump because it was a crazy vasoconstrictor, and then even your dick wouldn't even work. Right. But that's why all of that I would geek out on, right? It was about that supplement science of going, okay, let's run 10 grams of glycerol. Let's go ahead and let's make sure that we're on 200 milligrams of caffeine, not anything higher. And then let's also make it so that the caffeine is time released. So let's put a couple of different versions of natural caffeine in, and then let's go ahead and put this together with the yo, and then you're going to be able to feel it, and then you won't crash. But if you just go straight anhydrous, boom, you'd go right down and you would crash. And these are things when you turn around and you get those little nuances of being able to maximize what you're trying to get out of the workout and get super 3D, right? Because you want to get that pump, that crazy muscle pump.
Yeah. Those give me a crazy pump.
Right.
I'll even add in like an extra 5 of the liquid glycerol.
Because you want to go,
dude, this shit's good.
because it's addictive. I mean, honestly, you should
I've been doing it since like grad school.
Well, when we rebuild your program, we're
2014.
going to pick you up to 10. So you'll go to 20 grams total.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, that's the way you got to do it. We got you some good stuff. I got you some new stuff here.
Oh, let's get it.
Yeah, so you got to add in a new flavor in there, and you can just make it amazing. What's your favorite flavor?
Obviously, like the blue raz one. Like that's always a great flavor. The tropical punch, is that what it's called?
Yeah, tropical splash.
That's the first one I had.
Yeah.
It's super good too.
And tangerine, and then the other
tangerine. That's the one that like some of the citrusy stuff gives me a little bit of heartburn.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
because of how sour it is.
Yeah. But I love all the flavors, man.
That's awesome.
You nailed the taste.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that, like I said, I got some stuff while you're here. I'm gonna share with you. We got some stuff I'm working on that I can't wait to geek out on with you. But it's when you're now putting together the programs. Are you also how do you rate the top 3 products that you like right now? I mean, would you put creatine as number 1?
Oh, if I did like the ones with the most data, obviously creatine's up there. Whey protein isolates up there big time because it's no fats, faster digesting. It's amazing. Casein proteins are really good, obviously. Just things that have actual data to support them are the only ones I really use. But I love arginine. I love the citrulline for pump. And the glycerols is phenomenal. At least the liquid glycerol especially. Because I was using powder for a long time. We had that conversation about liquid and why it's smarter. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I got to have the product, and I was like, dude, this shit's way better.
Right.
Because I was having to do like 20 of the scoops of
powder. The powder's usually, it's a small percentage, right? It's anywhere from 35 to 60%, maybe 70%. And then you also have all of the binders that they use to be able to make sure that it dehydrates the product so it doesn't clump, because it's notorious for clumping. So then you have something there that's dehydrating you while you're trying to, hyperhydrate. Yeah. And so when you're doing that, it doesn't tend to work well.
That's another thing for supplementation wise. If you count like a hydration product into the supplement line of like what works, having something that is high in potassium, magnesium, and sodium, especially intra and pre-workout, is very smart. Especially for guys who are running anabolics and running insulin, because guys are running insulin, you got to have higher potassium. So the hydration supplementation is amazing. Like we do for the RP YouTube, Element T also sends us packets. So the Element packets, and then I also get the hydration stuff from you guys because like I just use both. I'll do
and I don't think Element is a problem. The reason why I didn't do a gram, and I'll actually talk about this because I've never openly talked about it, was so that because I personally like the 500 milligram dose, because I want to be able to, if I have to cut from 1,000 milligrams down to 500, I don't want all the core elements to be also half. Yeah. So that's why if I want to double up, smart. I want to double up those core elements, right?
That's why you can do pre and post.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
with
one of the
Element,
reasons.
it's like, I can have one in the morning maybe, and if I take more than, I'm going to shit all day.
That's right.
The magnesium's just like
through the roof, and then you got a gram of sodium, and then if you cut the gram of sodium to 500 milligrams, then maybe all the core constituents are now in half. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons. And then I also throw in acetylcholine to give you a little bit of that neurocognitive
it's good shit.
effect. Yeah. But I feel like it's one of those things where you don't realize how good it was. I was talking to Rough Diesel about it, right? Because we were training the other day. I don't know if you saw the video, but he'd come in and drove 4 hours from Houston. Yeah. And he was pumped, but he didn't get super 3D. And I go, you're dehydrated. And he's like, you know what? I haven't peed and I haven't done this. And I'm like, yeah. And then so we gave him some hydration powder and then threw that in 16 ounces, threw another pack in 16 ounces. And then all of a sudden he got striated, right? Because when you're dehydrated, your skin actually starts to look like leather, right? Because it's not stretched and it's not hydrated to the point where you can actually see the muscles start to separate. Minute he put that in, his next set, all of a sudden he went 3D. Crazy. And then it was just like crazy. He's like, holy crap, man, bro. Like his arms are like this, shoulders are pumped up. He's like, man, I'm ready to do more.
Yeah, that's why like pulling sodium and fluids before stage is just like really dumb.
Yeah.
For most people.
Yeah. Well, again, when you do that, again, it's a technique, right? Everybody has their own. But when you're cutting, I taper.
Taper.
Yeah.
Great.
I taper.
Yeah.
And then what happens is then depending on the look of the actual athlete and how much sodium I've kept in from the core earlier in the week, then I will turn around and, be able to titrate upwards or keep the same depending on what's happening at that point. So your body and the biochemistry of a person changes show to show. You can't do the same cookie cutter program 2 years in a row.
Yeah, you can peak someone the exact same way and it'll be a different outcome.
100%.
Pretty wild.
And that's why you have to read the road, right? You got to be able to understand when you look at somebody and after a meal or two, if their body is starting to get, washed out, are they washed out because you cut too much fluid? Are they washed out because they're not eating enough? Or are they washed out for something that they might not even be telling you?
Exactly.
And then you come and walk in and they got that weird look on their face.
Yeah.
Like, I just caught. And I've done that a lot of times when I walked in the room
awful.
when they didn't know I got in the room because they gave me an extra key or the wife let me in or something else. And it's deer in headlights, brother. And I've had that happen a lot of times.
Oh, that's
and
so
you're
frustrating.
Like, is that what you're doing? Well, okay.
That's why like battle testing them early on probably makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's kind of, and again, it doesn't cut that out completely, but it does cut down on the incidents.
Yeah.
That's why you have to build that trust so that they turn around and go, look, I got to make sure I tell my coach everything that I'm doing so that you can make reasonable decisions in the moment. Because at that point, that peaking process ends up becoming 90% of that outcome.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to be really, really close, and then you can get them to 90%. But if you really want to hit that touchdown, whether you run the ball in or you pass it in, that last 4 days is everything.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you went through it in these last
absolutely.
couple of peaks, especially, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
My last one was probably like it was also some of my leanest ever though. So the last peak was really good, and it was very similar to how I've peaked in the past, but we increased sodium quite a bit more, which was good because I had to.
Right.
Like I was getting that kind of like washed out look in the morning, and I was like, oh shit, we got to do something.
Yep.
And then we kind of looked and assessed. It was like, yeah, it's definitely a sodium issue. So we just increased the sodium in like 3 meals pre-stage, and it just came to life. I was like, oh, thank God, we're good.
Yeah, that happened 2 years ago with C-Bum. And when his body was all over the place, the second year I worked with him, because he had tore his lat. And that's the year we didn't know whether or not he was going to make it or not. And he couldn't train for about 3 weeks, especially his posterior chain and his like back and everything else, because he was doing those RDLs, and I think he was doing like 4 plates. And when he called me, and he was like just really distraught, right, upset. And I'm like, whoa, it couldn't be that bad. And then he told me what happened. I go, oh shit, it's pretty bad. But it was one of those things where then his body was always having kind of issues, because the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, it happened to J2 in 2011, and he tore his bicep. And when your body goes through trauma, your body, especially if it's even closer to the show, you end up creating a ton of inflammation. And that inflammation now, you have to deal with that inflammation.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the things you got to do is you have to account for that while you're having that person go through their peak week. He didn't tell me till I got to Vegas that he tore his bicep. Yes, because I said, hey man, you didn't send your last set. 2 weeks ago, you sent your last set. And I go a week before the show. And so for those final 5 days, he didn't send me the updates. And he's like, you'll see when you get here. Don't worry. I don't have time. And I got there and he's like, bro, I didn't want to show you because I knew you're going to get really upset. I'm going to get upset, but I need to know.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of shit that I need to know. About it. Right. It's not a matter of I'm going to be upset about it. I got to be able to know. And I remember he was staying at the Mandarin Oriental, and he had just moved out of his house, and then he was in a different kind of living environment as well. And I just looked at him, and I'm like, okay, how are we going to do this? What happened? And he goes, I was doing a muscle tech shoot, and I was putting the dumbbells back, and all of a sudden, rip, and he ripped his bicep.
And
I was
always
just like,
something dumb.
yeah.
Like that.
And he's like, you got something for that one, buddy? And I'm like, nope, I got to figure this out, right? We're going to have to like, and then it just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
The black and blue just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so, but again, then his body wasn't drying out, right? It wasn't drying out. So then you have to pick a path at that point and say, okay, am I going to try to dry it out, or am I going to try to take the full look?
Yeah.
And then, so exactly, I did the same thing with C-Bomb the second year. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go with a fuller look. I'm going to really take him to another level to be able to get those body parts full that are just not as big because of the fact that he had injured the lats. And that's what we did. So I
paid off big
2,000 or 3,000 calories before.
I was going to say it had to be crazy because he still had to make weight. So.
Well, no, he made weight already. So
Okay.
it was the morning of the show. 5 a.m. his body was just not working. And it was like we had to be at the tanning at 6:37, and he was on stage at 9:30. And it's 5:30, and I'm in his room, and I'm like having that oh fuck moment, right? And I'm like, this
eat.
Well, the fuck up fairy was at the door. She was trying to knock the door down, and I was like, I had my shoulder in there, and I'm like, I ain't letting this bitch in. I am not letting this bitch in. She was trying to show up, and I was like, I haven't seen you in a long time, and I do not want to talk to you today. And so then all of a sudden, I just got Courtney to make a big bowl, and I'm like, mix this, add this. And then it was just like, are you sure? I just ate this. I said, I don't care. Eat this too. Yeah. And all of a sudden it was like the Superman theme song came on. It's like, dun,
that's
dun,
awesome.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was just, his body started coming around, but that's the decision you had to make and be like, okay, drink this, eat this, put this much salt on this, do this, and bring liquids back, and let's get that body. And then all of a sudden just everything came up. And then by the time he hit the stage, I remember Jim Manny coming over to me. He's like, what is that?
That's awesome.
Like in a really good way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was, but again, it was just 4 or 5 hours before that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, this is not going to look good on stage.
Yeah.
And we had to go ahead and pivot. But that's what you do, is you've
100%.
got to figure that out.
That's why having the coach present is always a big deal.
Yeah. And you got to have a very clear mind, and you got to have clear, concise coaching. And you got to also have that person connected with you to trust you to turn around and do that.
Yep.
And say, eat this, eat this.
Yeah, because that's like, he easily, if he didn't have the full trust in you, could have been like, we've never done this before, so why would I do that?
Exactly. 100%.
Why would I do that? Like, we didn't do this last year or the year before that, and I've never done it before with any other coach, so why would I do this?
Right.
But since he trusted you, it was like, all right, you're the man, let's do this.
No, and we talked about it, and I said, have you ever had to do this? And he goes, well, we've had kind of something like this. And I'm like, well, we're going to do something, but a
little more drastic.
Yeah, a little more drastic when it comes to a couple of things.
That's cool, man.
But yeah, and then going into all of the stuff that you've been doing and you've been learning, I guess now you're starting to see more and more of these studies come out, right? And I see like even Jeff posting, Jeff Nippard, right? And he's posting things. And are you close with Jeff or no?
Yeah, we put him through a few workouts. And,
okay.
Yeah, hit him up every now and again. Go to Canada, that kind of stuff.
Is he getting some jiu-jitsu coaching from Mike?
I don't know.
With all those
he probably
those
should.
Fights, yeah. I was like, yeah, Jeff. If you're listening to this, or anybody knows Jeff, I'd love to have him on the podcast. Being a natural bodybuilder, and he's like, I think,
I'm sure he'd love that.
He's
put it in their ear.
Yeah, he's a guy that is very interesting because he was posting something about the form, right? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about form and how similar amount of muscle was built, whether you were super strict or you were using a little bit more body English, and a lot of those things. Did you see that study?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he made a video about it, yeah.
He made a video about it. So what do you think about that? Is that like counterintuitive versus are you seeing it?
I think the biggest issue there is the fatigue accumulation.
Okay.
And like you said, with people getting beat up from HIIT.
Yeah.
I think if you can put muscles in a more disadvantageous position, you're able to kind of get that same amount of mechanical tension that the muscle's detecting, and it's probably safer. It's probably more effective, especially if you can lean into that stretch position and not do the heaving and hoeing. With noticing the stretch is a little more important at this stage. We kind of know that. Doing some kind of body English on like a concentric phase, you can see people like power up like a barbell curl and then lower it slow. It could lead to potentially really good muscle growth. I'm not going to say that you should never do it. I think keeping technique as strict as possible is the best bet for basically everyone. We're not all Dorian Yates, who should have torn more muscles even sooner in his career with the training he was doing.
Yep.
He's just injury resilient, which is the biggest factor I don't think people talk about when it comes to genetics. There are so many examples of people where it's like Do you remember that one guy who was prepping for nationals and everybody thought he was going to be the next big thing, and then you just never heard about him again because he blew his pec off, or he blew his quad off, or he was squatting in a photo shoot and blew both his quads off the bone? Like, there's all kinds of shit like that.
Right.
But the guys you're seeing at the top are crazy injury resilient too. Because when you're doing some of these compounds and you're super dry, and you're like Ronnie Coleman, you're deadlifting 800 pounds 3 weeks out, but you're also on Winstraw and you're doing all this crazy shit.
Yes.
It's Ronnie Coleman. Yeah. The reason he didn't tear a hamstring is because he's Ronnie Coleman.
Right.
He's injury resilient. You could be just as strong as Ronnie Coleman, but you're not Ronnie, and your injury resiliency is probably not as high. You would pull a hamstring. So to say that that's the smartest thing to do is probably not right, and we shouldn't be looking at the athletes for the answers, probably more the coaches and the scientists. So yeah, you can definitely build a lot of muscle doing things a lot of different ways. It's more about the fatigue accumulation and the longevity of the career.
That's right.
And that's the biggest thing. I think if you can promote career longevity and be able to walk around when you're done with bodybuilding, unlike a lot of guys, probably a better bet for you.
Right.
I understand enjoyment, and I understand being in your early 20s and want to just heave heavy shit around. Cool, get it out of the way. But if you have the ability to step away from the ego, and understand what could probably be better for you, do that as early as possible. Don't have the injuries. Don't be like those guys.
Right.
Because you're going to get just as much muscle growth, if not more, by focusing on these little details. So yeah, could you put on a similar amount of muscle? Obviously. Yeah, especially whenever you have anabolics involved, you can look at a fucking weight and put on some muscle, depending on who you are.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's the best.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think, Hany comes to mind, right? So a guy like Hany who trains like an animal, I mean, he would turn around and put 2 or 3 plates and do walking lunges with it. He needs to do 6 plates a week out because in his head, but I go, okay, you're not doing a straight set, we'll do a strip set, because I have to, now it becomes like a hostage negotiation because he has his point of view. But in the last 7
that's cool though, because you're a guy operating on those anecdotes, and you just said you put them through like a strip set instead. These are techniques that, as somebody who looks at the literature and kind of like understands the physiology behind all this stuff, like you do, it's like, okay, they're implementing this pharmacology. They're this fatigued, they're this brittle in their joints and their connective tissue. I'm already implementing a periodized approach where there are more intensity techniques in that last 4 to 6 weeks than earlier on in the prep. So instead of allowing him to do 6 plates for 5 working sets, you were like, we're going to do 1 intensity technique strip set. That's it. That's what we're going to do. It's going to be intense as fuck. It's going to hurt. There's going to be a lot of metabolites in the tissue. And that's just a really smart way to work around athlete psychology, because they need that hard grit bullshit that they want to do that is not smart right now. And because you are very aware and you've done so much of this stuff, you get that. And I could make that as nerdy as I want and talk about it in study terms and why that's intelligent, but we've come to the same fucking conclusion. Yeah, that's brilliant. A brilliant way to get into the mind of an athlete and be like, hey, we're not focused on the load right now. We're focused on the fucking pain and the muscle, and I'm going to make it hurt. So get under the squat rack and let's go. And
look, he needs that stimulus, right? I'm trying to give him that stimulus so that psychologically he doesn't go home afterwards and he says, I left it on the table, because he is literally an animal, right? But if I can turn around and manipulate that thought process
100%.
And say, hey, look, we can get time under tension. We can turn around and take a little bit longer. We can turn around and do more reps, and we'll be able to get even more out of it with less likelihood of injury. Let's do it this way.
100%.
Okay. And, and you can hear me in Farsi say, hey, look, dude, I don't want you doing this, but we're going to do this or whatever, because I have to turn around and try to back him off. It was the same way when we brought him from 212 to open. Everyone's like, oh, what'd you do? What'd you do? And I go, less volume.
Less. Because he's crazy.
He would train 2 hours a day, twice a day, and then he would want to do cardio on top of it. And then when I said, look, your number one problem is you shouldn't be training twice a day. You should be training once a day. And instead of 3 hours, sometimes up to 3 hours, I need you to train for 90 minutes on the big body parts, and then up to an hour and 15 minutes for the smaller body parts. And that's all. Just that alone helped him win the Olympia, because we cut back the volume. His weight stayed high. He didn't break down so much muscle because he wasn't recovering. And again, it was also like, hey, take some EAAs, do more protein powder, let's increase your protein because your ability to absorb is much higher than you think because you're just afraid to eat.
And it's just cool to hear you say these types of things because it's like, it's not that you don't know that him not being a psychopath in the gym would lead to better outcomes. It's that he needs to be a psychopath in the gym.
Yes.
And the volume then has to come this way.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean he wouldn't get better results if he could do this. Right. It just means that he has to do this or he's not going to be happy with himself.
That's right.
And you've modified it to where, okay, we're going to get the results we can get because you like to train this way, and we're going to knock that down. You're only going to train this long. You're only going to do this much volume.
Yep.
And that's his optimal.
Right.
That's his optimal. Yeah. So when people are like, you're trying to talk about optimal this and optimal that, and it's got to be 10 to 20 sets, like I said earlier, it's like, no. It's athlete psychology dependent for fucking sure.
That's right.
And that's the cool thing with Nick Walker as well, is he loved the training so much. I got him on board. We started to train. I started to increase sets a little bit, and he's like, I need to do a couple sets where I'm one in the tank at least. And I'm like, volume's coming down then. It's a bunch of concepts put together to understand where these things fall.
Right.
It's not, I'm telling you have to do this. I'm telling you what could be the best. This could be better, potentially, for you.
Right.
But if your psychology is telling you no, then it's not better for you. This is better for you. So you got to understand that too. And that's where a really good coach comes into play. And that's why you're one of the best coaches of all time. The best coach of all time.
No, I appreciate that. But that's exactly where I'm trying to get more people to understand. Yeah. It's you got to also look at it as chess moves ahead, right? Your body's going to be constantly resisting things. And you have to think ahead about what you do. If you up your cardio, how is that going to affect your recovery? If you cut back your calories, how's that going to affect your recovery? And then if you want to
you do one or the other?
Exactly, right? Yeah. And again, doing too many stimulants. Yeah. I'm always like, hey, but you got to be careful of that. Yeah. So doing those things, right? And in those techniques of what goes on, like I like to start fat burners sometimes with some clients really early, right? And people go, oh, you got stressed about their adrenals. No, I need to cut their appetite back, so therefore I can get them going. Yeah. So you got to think of the human aspect when it comes to the psychology of what you're trying to get this person to do.
I mean, there's clients that are like, no, this client needs to get more fat off at the beginning of prep.
Yes.
Because when they get to the end of prep, they will push too fucking hard.
Yep.
Because they will see the fat they have left, and even if I know they're going to be on track, they will add fucking cardio, and I know they will do it. So I'm just going to put it in right now, and we're going to cut it back at the end of prep.
That's right.
And they're going to be ready 4 weeks out instead of 2 weeks out, and they're not going to be suffering psychologically and have more cortisol response. So it's just like there's a lot of that kind of shit in there. It's crazy.
You have to read the room.
100%.
And that's what makes the difference between a good coach and a great coach. You have to do these things because if you know this person is going to turn around and do what you just said and add more cardio, more volume, more of these things, then you have to turn around and be like, hey, you know what? I would normally have this person only on 300 grams of carbs or 350. Now I know this guy's going to be training his ass off, so I'm going to go ahead and bump that up a little bit because I know I got to feed the machine. So all of these things are all unspoken truths.
100%.
You know? Yeah. So again, we don't get too much into this type of detail on this podcast because most of the time I have an athlete sitting across the way, not somebody who's a coach and somebody who's, an exercise scientist who turns around and be able to really break it down. So for us to be able to geek it up together, I appreciate it because
absolutely.
That's what I love to do,
man.
What do you think is the number one thing that you notice that most people do wrong when it comes to being able to, like, whether it's a competitor or somebody who's getting ready for a photo shoot? What do you notice that, especially now with kind of that fresh eye that you're seeing?
Yeah.
What do you see?
In terms of training? Yeah,
in terms of training right now, what is the number one thing that you think, just wanted to make sure that, like, do you feel that that is it too much volume? Is it technique? Is it range of motion? What do you feel like is the number one?
We've put tons of top pros through workouts at this point. I've been reached out to by so many other coaches in the industry. Like, can you help this athlete? Can you do this? And every session we've ever done on YouTube, it's technique. It's technique. Like, people have been taught just garbage training technique for the longest time. And when you get your hands on somebody, the first thing I'll ask them is how many movements do you do and how many sets do you do? and they'll tell me something outlandish. And I'm like, we're going to do half of that today. And you're going to have a better pump than you've ever had in your life. I promise. And every single time, it's like, how the hell did you do that? And it's the same thing you do.
Yeah.
It's like, I need you to, instead of being taught in high school, feet forward and sit back in a squat, I'm going to have you do this a little bit, point your toes out, open your hips, and get deeper. And you're going to feel that you have more forward knee flexion, and now your quads are actually getting stimulated really well. There's no glutes in it anymore, and you're just going to have a really bad time, but a good time. And,
you're speaking from self-evidence. Like, I mean, this is like, again, that's what you did, right?
Yeah.
That's how you used to train.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all were taught in high school, like, do this exact thing. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, great.
Right.
You don't question it. And then you start to question it a little bit, and that's what gets you really involved and interested in it. And you're like, okay, well, they said this, but it was wrong. Oh, there's a science to this.
Right.
And we all took that path. You know what I mean?
So it's the biomechanics is probably the number one thing.
I would say that, and just like straight up just not knowing how to train properly. It's just people go into the gym with the all or nothing mindset, and it's just so ass backwards. Like, doing too much is real, like you just said with Hany.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
It is.
And I think especially for people who use the gym as an escape, or for people who went to the gym, and when you have good genetics, because within 6 months of training, you're putting on more muscle than all your friends. You have the six pack. You have like little delts popping through, and you're like, oh shit, I have good genetics. You don't conceptualize it that way, but it's obvious, and like you stick with it because you're good at that thing. It's like if you jump into the pool and you swim a faster lap than everybody, you tend to be a swimmer. You go toward the thing that you're good at, and when somebody is going balls to the wall because they went to the gym as an escape and they're putting on a ton of muscle, they think like, okay, so I know what I'm doing. Right. I know what I'm doing. And they're just doing way too much most of the time. So the technique and doing too much are huge issues. And I think if you could just break down everybody's technique and tell them that they don't have to do so much like you do with Hany, they're going to make a lot more progress. Right. It just is what it is,
Especially for the people who've been training a long time, right? But I do feel like a lot of people, again, who are starting out, and if you're listening to this podcast and you're starting out, what you want to do is you want to learn the proper technique, because if you, like a bad golf swing, if you learn improper positioning and improper just form, you're going to have a problem for a very long time.
Exactly.
And you're more likely to get hurt, but you're also not going to be able to grow. And you're not getting full range of motion. You're going to end up hurting your knee. You're going to end up having some kind of issue with your shoulder. And you're not going to be able to really take yourself to the next level. And most people don't have good genetics, unfortunately, right? Most people come to me and go, hey, Hany, I want to be like this guy, or I want to be like this guy. And I go, look, you don't have the genetics of that guy. So you may be able to get a lot better, but you have to be able to be the best version of yourself. So what are you doing wrong? Again, getting a training session in, being able to watch something, being able to get on an app, being able to do those things. Because when we started out a long time ago, it was like magazines and Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger, all of those things. I would read everything, right?
And you had like a starting position of the exercise and a stopping position. There were no videos. It was just like, oh, so that's how you squat then.
Yes, exactly. And then you would learn from the biggest guy in the gym, right? That's what I learned. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have any of that stuff when I was growing up, right? You would have maybe a strength and conditioning coach in high school, and if you'd be lucky, you turn around and, the guy would know a little bit. Most of them didn't, unfortunately, And then if you really want to know about nutrition, they knew nothing. Right. I mean, I had one of my strength and conditioning coaches he knew that I had really read up on a lot of training, nutrition, supplementation, because I geeked out about it when I got into it when I was 12, 13 years old. And he goes, yeah, Hany, what do you suggest we do for some extra carbs and this and that? And we'd be like, we'd do pasta, and we turn around and do sandwiches. We talk about like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches when you can, just to keep weight on during double days, and doing pasta.
One of the old tropes from like a lot of the football coaches was like, gotta drink chocolate milk after you lift, man.
Was that one of them? Right. No. So my guy,
it was huge, man. It was huge. They would all say it.
Was like, he's like, Hany, what do you think? And I would be like, hey, you can throw in some pasta. You can throw in this. We can throw in, when you're making your protein shake, throw in a banana, throw in, the nut butters, throw in all of these things so you can be able to end up doing higher calories. And then he would turn around, and the guy's like, my coach said to me, he goes, yeah, speaking of bananas, guys, make sure you're hitting the bananas all the time. And I was just listening.
Overdose on potassium.
Yeah, well, no. This is what he said, honest to God. He goes, and we're all sitting in the weight room. And he turned around and he'd be like, and I'm like, okay, like bananas. And I'm like, all right, like it's a great snack, you know, like it's easy. It's this. Maybe that's why he's like, and then somebody rose their hand. Like, hey, coach. Okay, well, how many bananas? He's like, dude, as many as you can. And I'm like, whoa, right? And then I'm just like, and then he goes, coach, can I ask you why, you know, so many bananas? And he says, well, what do gorillas eat?
Oh my God.
And that he said, you ever see a small gorilla? And I was thinking,
my God.
gorillas eat bamboo, bro.
You know,
they don't eat
honestly,
they eat that. But those are the things
Dude,
that I
honestly,
grew up with in the early 90s.
that is like some straight up old hat bodybuilder nonsense logic, though.
Yeah.
Like, we'll look at Ronnie. We'll look at Dorian. It's like, no, we'll look at the coaches.
Right.
What are they saying, dude? What are the scientists saying? But that is so funny because that is like, if you break it down, that's literally the same logic. And
It
it's
is.
so funny.
It's just,
That's why this kind of stuff's important.
yeah. And we're talking about it. And that's why I said, like, you know, everybody wants to know the magic cycle.
Yeah.
What's the magic cycle?
Yeah.
The magic cycle I'm going to share with everybody on this podcast for the first time is the least amount of drugs that you can take and still recover quickly. That is the magic cycle.
Absolutely.
So, okay, it could be 300 milligrams a week. It could be just a little bit more. It could be a combination of a couple different anabolic types. But what the key is to take the least amount and get the most out of it, because your body will eventually acclimate to those dosages. And as you get bigger, you'll notice that you don't give the same dosage as a Great Dane as you do a Chihuahua,
Right.
and then you may take more. But if you have room for that, because otherwise what you're going to do is compound side effects. So the best coach is the coach that can get you as far as possible with the least amount of gear. Yeah. That is the best coach. So when you turn around and you can be able to reproduce, that's a great byproduct of a good cycle, because you can turn around and procreate.
Yeah,
things of that nature.
I think in our field, it's tough. We get a lot of guys because we're able to like pick and choose.
Yeah.
Who have done the stupid shit.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're able to do the low stuff.
Yeah.
But because they did the dumb shit, they got as big as they did.
Yes.
But they got there and they weren't healthy.
No.
So they took a shortcut to get somewhere quicker, but now they're dealing with a bunch of sides that they don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you want to avoid.
Correct.
So we're unfortunately, same thing with the training. I'm unfortunately getting guys who are injured already.
Mm-hmm.
The guys who are like, oh yeah, I trained super hardcore for 10 years and I beat my knees up, beat my shoulders up, I tore this muscle, I did that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, see. And then they'll go through a session like, man, I wish I would have known this 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you still wouldn't have done it. You would have known it, but you wouldn't have done it. You would have been the guy who's talking shit on it. But it's the same thing with us, with the compounds. It's like, I know what you did because I saw what your old coach gave you.
Right.
You're never going to fucking do that again.
Right.
Ever. Because you have the size and we can maintain that size with much less.
Correct.
So it's, hopefully people are able to, and this is cool because, again, leaving the industry better than we found it, like, there was not a lot of access to like understanding what coaches knew what about what cycle and design and things of that nature. But there are a lot of guys out there now that are really smart and they use these like safer use models and they do exactly what you just said. And like, I could name drop a ton, we could talk about it, but like, it's just, if we can keep having these conversations and leave the industry better in that capacity, especially because that's the most dangerous aspect of all this shit, it's just better for everyone. And ChatGPT is really good at extracting data at this point. If you put in like 8 clients' lab work and you put in like, hey, this is exactly what they did, can you find a trend line? I guarantee you it could find a trend line. Like, this is why. It's pretty crazy, man.
My only problem with that is, where is that information going? Like DeepSync, right? True. It's going, when you go to that, now DeepSync, it's going straight to Beijing, right? It's like, it's going straight there. They noticed it. They went and followed the data and it's going right there. With ChatGPT, where's that information going? All these people's blood work. Man. But yeah, that's a little sus, you know, but 21andMe, you know, I think Google and a bunch of other, maybe some pharmaceutical companies bought that information.
Oh yeah. 23andMe?
Yeah, that's what it was, 23andMe, yeah. And all that stuff. So it's like, all that shady shit's going on. Like, you're just like, what the hell?
Hey, man, if they're using it to make the world better, I don't give a shit. Take it all.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to make it to what I think they're trying to sell everybody what they think they're going to need in about 10 to 20 years.
Hey man, hopefully they're it's cool. Some of the things that are happening with AI, though, like reversing of cancer cells, killing of cancer cells, like they're coming to solutions, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, you hear about this vaccine that they have in Russia, and they turn around. Yeah, Putin said that he has a vaccine in Russia that is an anti-cancer vaccine, and again, didn't get into too many specifics yet, but supposedly that's going to be coming out. I do want to ask you one thing about your take on the GLP-1s, right? And have you had a chance to play around with them at all, like Ozempic or any of those types of semaglutide?
On myself, no. On clients that want to use them, I'm fortunate to know Mike's wife, Dr. Crystal, who's a sports medicine physician. She obviously knows about all this stuff prior to it hitting actual gin pop. And they've used them very successfully. Dosages, keeping them low. Microdosing is probably better than just taking a megadose. All that stuff. Titrating up, down, depending on where the bodybuilder's at. They're only getting better and better. Tirzepatide, retatrutide, semaglutide was the first, GLP-1. And now they're acting on separate pathways, and the side effects are going down and down and down. And again, they've been studied for a long time. It's not just like they just whipped this shit up and they were like, all right, let's send it out.
Right.
Like it's been in the background for a while.
Right.
It's like it's the same way with the internet. Like it was kind of happening before it was happening. So, yeah, they're helping people lose weight. A lot of people are freaking out about like the bone mineral density loss and things of that nature. It's like, well, that chick wasn't training. She wasn't eating protein. Of course that fucking happened. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the number one thing I think that people have a problem with, because there's a lot of people that just think it's a quick fix. You don't realize there's always something that has to be able to connect to be able to get the best out of something.
Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing about
just like anabolics. You can't take
nutrition.
anabolics and sitting out on the couch at home. You can't take anabolics and train and not eat protein.
Yep.
There has to be a cumulative effect that has to occur, right?
I think the biggest thing with those is just, especially you're a bodybuilder. If you're a bodybuilder using those things, you're training, you're eating protein, and if you can learn periodization nutritionally, what a settling point is, what a set point is, how that works in the human physiology, and you can use these to help you get to there post-contest and not be a fucking balloon animal after you get off stage and just eat a bunch of shit. They're great for post-comp stuff. They're great for like doing that post-show period. They can help people into the shows. People getting upset that it's like a quick fix seem to be the same old hat bodybuilders who are just like, well, just fucking suffer, man. Just what the hell?
Right.
Like, why? There's a solution. They can be less hungry. They can play with their fucking kids 2 weeks out. They're not an asshole. Why? You just want them to suffer because you did? Well, okay.
Right.
Who gives a shit? Like, let them use it. If hunger is like a huge... I have no hunger.
Right.
Like, some of the pharmacology that's inputted for me crushes my fucking appetite already.
Yeah, and also just the over-count on fat burners, too, can really cut that back.
Yeah.
You know, and you want to eat because that's what's anabolic. The most anabolic compound is being able to eat. It's protein, right? And if you can't eat, I think that's the number one thing, the takeaway that I want everybody to hear is the fact that you got to eat, and when it shuts it down completely, of course you're going to lose muscle, and you're going to be able to do that. Exactly. So
well, that's the thing. If you can't eat because you're on too much, you taper the shit down.
Well,
if hunger is your biggest issue in a contest prep and it really has held you back, have the conversation with your coach. Have it. It's fine. I'm going to still try to help you find better ways. But if you seriously need it, I'm not against it at all. But we're not going to just bump up to the 2 milligram. Like, it's like 0.25 and maybe 0.1 like 3 times a week. And then you tell me how you're feeling.
Right.
And if you're like, oh, I'm having a hard time getting my meals in now, I'm like, okay, well, hunger wasn't your issue. The issue is that you have cravings and you're giving into them and you're being kind of a pussy. Let's fix that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. And that's what you're trying to cover up with stuff like this, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. And I think most of the time, but again, I'm just
could be.
And I just think that people want just an easy way out. Yeah. But you know, when you dance,
I mean, my thing is, dude, if we can get if there's a medication that comes out, right, and it preserves all your muscle and it speeds up fat loss by like 100 times.
Yep.
And you can now walk around at 4% body fat all the time, and you don't risk injuring your muscles. You don't risk injuring a joint. You don't risk any of this crazy shit that we have to worry about. No hormonal issues. If that drug comes out, and I look at somebody and I say, "Oh, you're taking that? why? Like,
Right.
oh, you're taking the easy way out. I don't give a fuck.
Right.
Take the fucking easy way out. You want to look good naked. I don't give a shit. Like, the fact that people get mad about that kind of stuff, I'm just like, dude, okay, I get it. You suffered harder than I did. Okay, you're the man. Now that that's out of the way, I'm going to go back to taking this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you can turn around and be able to do that, you know, and I'm sure that's going to be like, we're about, let me look at this, about 10 years off
Right.
from something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I do think that they're going to be able to try to come out with something.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, myostatin
minimizing it.
inhibitors are already being looked at, like, big time. Like,
Don't
they're actually pretty close.
Don't be giving up my secrets, bro. I'll talk to you later on tomorrow when we give you that.
They're looking at it very close.
That's it. Don't tell Dr. Mike.
Yeah. Oh, you know, his wife's a sports med physician, so
Yeah.
she's kind of privy to all this information.
Yeah, and he's Russian.
And he's Russian. Yeah. He's got the vaccine already.
That's it. No, man, it was awesome. I'm glad that we got a chance to
it's
do
sweet,
this,
man.
and we love you being a part of the team and
I love it.
being able to give all the amazing feedback.
Genuinely, Hany, like, I've turned on every sponsorship I've ever been offered. My thing was always giving back. This is one of the biggest reasons that I did it, getting you on the RP podcast.
Yep.
Like I told you straight up, I was like, I don't need like the monthly stipend. I don't need the athlete contract. I don't need any of this stuff. I just want people like us to be able to have these conversations, because people put us in camps and it's weird as hell because we all meet each other and we all like agree on so much shit.
Right.
But then we have people commenting like, Hany Rambod, thoughts? And it's like, do you have thoughts? They're like, do you have thoughts about what this guy said, instead of just tagging me and asking me to put my input here? And it's when guys like that have been put in these separate camps show people that it's really more like we're all in one big camp helping each other out.
Yeah.
It's just better for the community.
Absolutely.
And it's like what you're trying to build with the community, with the athletes and here and the coaching platforms and stuff.
Yeah.
It's cool as hell, and this is the exact reason why I wanted to sign with you guys, because your products are fucking delicious, first of all. The formulas are actually backed by science, which is amazing. And the team is it's just a bunch of great people. You're very intelligent, and I couldn't be more grateful. It's cool, man.
No,
really
thank
is.
you. Thank you so much for the kind words, and I feel likewise. I can't wait to jump on the RP podcast.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And we're gonna call this one like RP versus FST-7.
Yeah,
just so we can get the clickbait. You know,
I love it.
Yeah. But
Jared and Hany disagree on everything.
that's right, everything. That's it. But yeah, that would be a good thumbnail. We'll put that together. Be like, oh, put him in a headlock. You know,
Put me in a headlock. What's that for the thumbnail?
That's it. That's it. I don't know. In real life, it'll definitely be the other way around. But no, and it's been awesome, and we're gonna have some really cool stuff, and I cannot wait to do more training stuff, more collab, just talking about things, walking through them, and really setting the tone for the rest of the industry, and being able to have more candid conversations like the one we just had.
Hell yeah.
So again, Hany Rambod, Jared Feather, and that's the truth.